Coming to you from the Toby Family Auditorium at the Commonwealth Club. It's Week to Week, the political roundtable for Thursday, February 8th, 2018. Welcome, everybody. Tonight, we are marking 6 years of Week to Week. Tonight is also another anniversary. Mary and Chuck Nevius are marking 33 years of marriage, so congratulations.
Yeah.
And I would like to say, in all those 33 years, we've never had a disagreement.
Yeah, exactly.
We had one, and I think it was my fault, I think, President.
See, they agree.
So, of course, the 33rd anniversary is the political roundtable anniversary. So a gift you give someone at that point. I'm John Zipper, your host for Week to Week and the Commonwealth Club's Vice President of Media and Editorial. On today's program, we're going to talk about the latest shutdown, which are the exact same words I said at the last week. Literally. I did not change those words. We'll talk about Little Adam Schiff and other Trump news, San Francisco city politics, statewide races, car crimes, and more. And of course, we'll end the evening with our live news quiz. The Commonwealth Club, of course, is a place for people with a wide range of views, so any opinions that are expressed up here are those solely of the speakers and not of the Commonwealth Club. Speaking of speakers, let's meet them for tonight. Starting on the far end of the stage with Carson Bruno, the Assistant Dean for Admissions and Program Relations at Pepperdine University's School of Public Policy. He's a California policy specialist, former Hoover Institute research fellow, and he's on Twitter at CarsonJFBruno. So welcome back, Carson.
Thank you.
Next to him, returning after a long absence, is Melissa Cain, the politics and legal reporter for CBS Bay Area, that's KPIX5. She's on Twitter at MelissaCain1. So welcome back. Next to me is Mr. Anniversary C.W. Nevius, columnist for the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat, former columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle. He's on Twitter at C.W. Nevius. So welcome back. There are question cards spread throughout the room. I think you all know how that's done. Write out some questions. They'll be delivered to me, and I'll try to ask as many as possible during our time today. So on to the roundtable. We checked just before we came in here. The CNN countdown to shutdown is still going. The U.S. Congress had one thing on its to-do list today: pass a bill to fund the government. Yesterday, we saw that U.S. senators reached a bipartisan agreement. They got a deal out of it, but it's been criticized by some in both parties for either its negative budget impact or its lack of resolution for the DACA immigrants. So the focus of the Senate deal, it was a 2-year deal. That was actually what stood out most to me. I mean, let's start with you, Carson. Why a 2-year deal? Why is that? Why are they able to get that? Because we've been doing these like short-term things for so long.
Well, it's about time. I was watching CNN as I was in my hotel room, and Senator Rand Paul was on, and he made a good point in that I believe this is something like the 14th CR since the end of the last budget cycle. Typically what we're supposed to see is the Congress pass a budget that lasts an entire year. That's sent to the president. He signs it, or I guess he doesn't really sign it, but and kind of moves on. And we kind of then operate under that kind of funding scheme. That hasn't been the case, and that hasn't really been the case for a long time. This is not just a new phenomenon of the Trump administration. This was something that we dealt with under Obama. It's really something we dealt with to a certain extent under the Bush administration as well, and kind of dating backwards in time as well. So the fact that they could get a 2-year agreement of some sort is quite amazing, given the fact that really what we've been seeing is 2 weeks to a few months of kind of just an emergency spending authorization just to make sure the doors stay open, which is no good way to really finance anything. Think about it yourself. You wouldn't kind of think, okay, I'm going to only allow myself access to 2 days worth of money, and then I'm going to figure out how I'm going to pay for the next 2 days, 2 days from now. No one operates in that sort of way, neither should a government, because there's no long-term policy. There's no really way to kind of understand how the funding mechanisms, how the agencies, how we're actually spending that money appropriately. Therefore, then we can't do the reforms to make sure that we aren't spending more than we ought to be spending. And that's really the biggest debate here. How much money should the federal government be spending? Is it spending it well? Is it spending it in the right places? And you can't have that sort of debate when you're just trying to beat the clock and make sure that you're you're authorizing something before midnight.
I don't know. Is that the debate that's happening? I don't know right now. Since the passage of the tax bill, it seems like Republicans or some Republicans have abandoned the idea of deficit issues, and so now this 2-year budget, it's like, oh well, that's easy as long as everybody gets everything they want. Why not a 20-year budget since the deficit doesn't matter, it's official. And neither party seems to be minding that store entirely. Then, the debate over how much money should we be spending, I'm not sure if that's really happening or if everyone just wants to put their stuff in and then say, okay, yay, we got a 2-year budget deal. I know Republicans also, to your point, have been getting a lot of pressure from the military because the military really suffers. They're not able to purchase large planes. I don't know. I'm making that whatever.
That's
they do.
the technical term, I think. Large planes.
Big old planes.
Yeah.
The big old plane system is having a hard time getting funding. So it's I know they've been pressuring Republicans as well, saying we've got to have some a more steady stream of funding because they need to engage in their contracts, which are fairly long term. So, but it just seems like everyone gets everything they want, and then yay, we have a deal, but we also have a huge impact on our deficit. In case anyone cares.
Melissa brings
maybe
up,
they don't.
And you bring up a really great point, Melissa, in the fact that since Trump was elected, this talk of deficit spending, of the debt, has gone away. Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell were on TV every single night during the Obama administration talking about deficits, talking about the debt, talking about it being the most critical thing, the critical challenge, the critical existential crisis facing America. Now the conversation's completely gone. And I think a lot of Republican voters are going to really hold a lot of their congressmen and senators accountable for this, hopefully, because at the end of the day, that's what those type of voters really do care about. That's what that's the genesis of the Tea Party movement that we saw in 2010 was really around the deficit and the debt. And so there are quite a few, particularly congressmen and congresswomen, who got elected purely because of that issue. And if they don't really stand up and do something about it, they're going to probably face the wrath of some voters, maybe not all of them. Maybe they won't get unelected because of this, but Rand Paul really is making a big deal about that right now as we speak. Yeah, that's really why we're facing a shutdown tonight.
It's a little back to the future, too, because the Bush-Cheney, they said the deficit didn't matter. And they rang it up like crazy. And it's important to remember, the Senate has agreed to this, but now we're going to the House. And now we're going to get a lesson on why you don't want to be the minority party by a large margin. Nancy Pelosi's playing her cards, but she doesn't have much to play. At this point, she can be symbolic. She does a 7-hour speech. God bless her. That was great TV. Did you get something out of it? Not so much. Okay. Now we're going to threaten a shutdown. How many people remember a successful shutdown? It wasn't that long ago. The Republicans shut down the government. Ted Cruz shut down the government. We laughed at him. So I think the Democrats are playing the long game until they can get to November, and then they hope this tsunami happens. And if it does, things will be much different. But right now, she is, for the Democrats, trying to get what she can, and it's unconscionable that we can't do something for the Dreamers. How is that possible?
Well, and there is cross-party support to do something.
And across the country to do something.
Right. So is it
but people,
leadership
remember,
that's not allowing it?
There's two axes, right? There's sort of what we like and how much we like it, right? So you guys might remember years ago there was this issue of an extension of unemployment benefits, and Republicans cut it off. And polls showed 99% of Americans were in favor of this extension of unemployment benefits. And everyone was all over the talk shows going, we don't understand. Everyone in America loves this. But Republicans are still cutting it off. And that wasn't the issue. The issue was, yes, people like it, but how much do they like it? Do they like it? Do they want to shut down the government over it? Is that what they're going to vote based upon? And the polls show that that's not the case. And when you talk about what should we do for the Dreamers, there's this issue of legalization versus citizenship. So when you say, across the aisle, everyone thinks we should protect Dreamers, that's a serious question when you get into the devilish details about whether or not there's a citizenship path or not. So just saying, lots of Americans want this and lots of people in Congress want this doesn't get us into an actual agreement if A, people don't care enough. They just say, yes, yay, we like it, but, you know, whatever. And also if members of Congress have serious issues and differences when it comes to the specifics of how something like that would work. So, you know, I think that those are some of the issues about why this isn't getting dealt with.
And just one thing that I clearly don't understand, you can explain it to me, but when we have these shutdowns, I don't think they're that bad. I mean, we put signs up at Muir Woods and say you can't go in Muir Woods, but for you and me and everyone else, does this really affect our quality of life that much? I understand it's a symbolic gesture and we're not funding the government, but I don't think it's that good a lever to get things accomplished. The Senate managed to get a concession from Mitch McConnell to say, I'll bring a DACA measure to the Senate. Nancy Pelosi can't get that from Paul Ryan. I'm not sure why, but
The Hastert rule.
Hastert, yeah.
Well, you know, one of the fun things about being the speaker.
Explain the Hastert
One of
rule,
the
if you would.
joys of being
Everybody
the
knows
speaker,
that.
because it's something that Nancy Pelosi could use too, is that when you're the speaker, you get to vote. You get to decide what gets voted on. And so the Hastert rule basically says that you don't bring something to the floor to be voted on unless a majority of your party wants it. And what that basically does is it prevents, say, all the Democrats from teaming up with a sliver of Republicans to do something sort of moderate. So what Paul Ryan is doing by invoking the Hastert rule is basically saying unless and until a majority of the Republicans in Congress are going to be in favor of whatever this is that they bring up, he's not going to bring it up for a vote. And so I remember when this happened, when Mitch McConnell made the agreement that he was going to allow the Senate to vote on a DACA deal, it was like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I mean, yay, but the House is the problem, right? It's Paul Ryan and this Hastert rule, which again, Pelosi used too, that is really going to be the thing standing in the way. So until a majority of Republicans in Congress can agree on a certain, DACA solution, it's not going to get voted on at all on the floor of the House. So even though the Senate, can do it, and to get back to your initial thing, for a couple days, the government shutdown is no big deal, but then when people's Social Security checks stop coming and people in the military stop getting paid and Medicare reimbursement stop going out, then it gets pretty dicey. But, you can skate for a few days. You can skate for a weekend, but, after a couple weeks, after the payday cycle goes through, that's when it starts hurting. But a shutdown of a few days,
That's such a big
it's just embarrassing.
The DACA situation, I think, is an excellent example that we're living through right now that really highlights the perils of trying to do something sweeping through executive order. Yes, President Obama did DACA because there was really inaction on the Congress's standpoint when he was trying to get this through. So he and his White House really saw that as the only way to do something. But now we're really seeing what the ramifications of that sort of action are, that it can be completely wiped away by the next president, that there's no sort of legal mechanism to really protect it. And then you are kind of whiplashing people back and forth because this at the end of the day, it is a person issue. Nancy Pelosi last night was really highlighting that aspect. This is not DACA, this kind of weird kind of acronym that really makes no sense to anyone. These are real people. And so by doing this by executive order, it really kind of set up this case where you're kind of throwing them into limbo. And this goes on both sides. People are celebrating what President Trump doing right now via executive order. The next president, Republican or Democrat, can completely wipe all that away and really kind of change things around. So it's important to really remember what the process is and that the process was set up for a purpose, and it was really to make sure that we're not kind of going back and forth depending on kind of who wins elections every 4 years.
One of the things I believe we learned from Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, was that our 71-year-old president only works like a partial day. Yet 77-year-old Nancy Pelosi gave an 8-hour speech. We're reminded of Hillary Clinton testifying before Congress for 11 hours. I don't want to make the crowd pandering suggestion that women are indeed stronger than men, but guys, we need to up our game.
To be fair, I could do neither of those. It's really not.
Well, someone in the audience asked, so in her marathon 8-hour speech on the House floor, did Nancy Pelosi change anything on the DACA front, or was this just her kind of showing that she's concerned and trying to do something? Did she actually help or hurt the cause? Any thoughts?
Well, I think she's a little bit under fire. There's a lot of talk about if the election goes as we think it may, that younger group of people may come in and say, you had a wonderful run. Thanks a lot. Well, you'll have to step aside. So this may be her way of saying that she is relevant. But no, I don't think she did change that. I just keep looking at Paul Ryan, and I think he seems like a decent guy. I keep expecting him to do the right thing, and he just doesn't. And I feel like maybe I should give up on him. Again, DACA is just, it makes so much sense. I don't know what the deal is, but there has to be a deal there. The idea that you're taking children who were born in the United States and deporting them is impossible. That's not American values. Mm-hmm. Who says that?
They weren't born in the United States. Yeah.
Right.
They were brought here as kids.
Brought here as kids. Sorry.
Okay.
So they're going to get in a lot of trouble, frankly, for getting a budget done without a DACA deal because they've promised it and people have demanded it. Some, vocal members of the left have demanded it. And so I think that this was just a totem to say, I really tried. I sort of left it on the field. But from a technical perspective, she didn't really accomplish anything. Of course, there's no filibuster in the House. It was just sort of a spectacle. But just to say, I really do care. We really do want to do this. We're going to try. Look what we did for your cause, as opposed to just sort of doing nothing, and then they would just be accused of doing nothing. So at least they can say they did this.
Okay.
I would say that there is an argument, and I don't know if this is actually a good argument, but there is an argument that they actually hurt the situation when it comes to DACA. I do know that the NRCC used that speech to do a massive fundraising push yesterday and today, and they raised lots and lots of money off of it. Nancy Pelosi is the Republicans, especially in Congress, their best friend, because anytime she speaks and says something, they raise tons of money. They do tons of advertising in all of the districts against her, not necessarily against the Democrat who's running in that district. And she has really helped, I think, the Republicans maintain their majority by really kind of using her as this foil in many parts of the country that really see San Francisco as an anomaly, not kind of what America is all about.
Yeah, if you're ever in like Ohio during a congressional race, you'll see a political ad that's like, so-and-so votes like Nancy Pelosi. Yeah. It's like, she's like the boogeyman across America during election season. If you ever see other if you're ever traveling or visiting someone, turn on the TV. There you go. The Nancy Pelosi ad comes up, and it's yeah.
And while Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are not popular people either, even within the Republican Party, they don't, for some reason, have this same kind of foil ability that Nancy Pelosi has really kind of developed. Now, on the other side, she is obviously a fantastic leader in the sense that she has maintained control of her caucus through times where really any other leader probably would have been set aside and voted out by their own caucus. So
she was known for keeping very tight control over what can be a very raucous caucus.
Exactly.
Raucous caucus.
She has great talent in that regard.
It's a Bloom County quote.
Yeah. But I do think that there is an argument to be made that this actually maybe set back an ability to come to an agreement, especially within the House, because we're already seeing an agreement, or at least compromises and agreements being made at the Senate side.
So she's like the Ron Conway of Congress.
Well, hold on to that thought. Before we move on, someone asks about whether this plan really is going to set up a lot of deficit spending, or are some of the Republicans perhaps counting on cuts to Medicare, Social Security, or something to pay for those cuts. Any thoughts?
Some of them are, do say that is sort of the plan in the future. That's something Paul Ryan has been pushing for years. But also the other ideas, in addition to the cuts, that the tax cuts will pay for themselves in economic growth, of course. So we've got that out there as well. So they expect some growth and maybe some future cuts. And maybe that would help with the tax bill. But then when you add another $1 trillion on because of this 2-year budget, we're starting talking about real money at some point. And it's not clear how much you can cut or grow your way out of a deficit that gets to a certain point.
And let's not forget, for all things that President Trump is, he is not a fiscal conservative. On the campaign, he talked up that he was the best at debt, and he really is the best at debt. He can really manipulate debt really well to his own benefit. And that he said that nothing would change about Social Security, that he would protect Medicare. And so he really made these very vocal on the campaign trail. So I don't really think that there's any movement within the White House to really even consider cuts to the entitlement spending that is reforms are necessary in order to get spending under control. That's a fact. How that occurs is where we can start to have debates about kind of what needs to happen. But to get control over government spending, entitlements have to be a major part of the conversation, and the White House isn't there, so I can't see how the Congress can get there.
Well, let's talk more about the Trump administration. As former White House staffer Omarosa said about the White House, quote, "It's not my circus, not my monkeys," unquote. Ooh. Don't fully understand it, but I don't think she was complimenting things. Every time we do this, there's always a lot to talk about. Let's start with this parade. Chuck?
Yes?
The president has said he wants to hold a military parade.
I know. I know.
And though a lot of the original commentary was, citing these big, military parades in Red Square in Moscow, he was inspired by the French.
The French had a great parade.
Yes.
And his quote, I'm blanking on the prime minister, but his quote was, "We have to try to top that." So we couldn't just appreciate it and say parade is good. Yeah, it's. It speaks to him that. The funny thing about him is he assumes everyone is probably stretching the truth, trying to get ahead, because that's what he's doing. He's doing all those things. So everybody else is like that too. So people will love a parade. People will want to see that. Who wants to see tanks down the Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C.? As I think Colbert said, in this world, if American tanks are coming down your street, you're in big trouble.
Melissa?
If you go back, as I have, because that's my life, I looked at, if you look at the Eisenhower inauguration parade on YouTube.
You looked at that?
I did.
That's
I did
really
before
good.
the current one, because again, I'm
good.
bored. It was tons of tanks and large missiles and things, and it looked so weird. I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, times have really changed.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we don't do that anymore. This looks bananas. This looks like North Korea. This looks like other countries, not like America. And boy, am I glad that's over. But it is a strange sight to have sort of the White House and other buildings, and then in front of them having these kinds of things. Just visually, it's odd, and I encourage people to look at that. If you wonder sort of what it would be like, what it would look like to see that sort of going down Pennsylvania Avenue. It's crazy, and even a lot of Republicans are saying, you know what, we love our veterans, we love our military, let's take that money, because it'll cost millions. Let's take that money and let's spend it on other things. I'll point out one other thing. The one thing that is good about the North Korea parades is that we get to look at their stuff. So much of our intelligence is like, let's take a look at, well, that looks like it's like that big, I guess it's like that big. We look at it like, why would you parade out a bunch of stuff and give everyone the opportunity to look at it and measure it and and otherwise get information about all of our super secret weapons? So there are a lot of reasons why this is a bad idea and why it was going to cost a lot of money that could be spent on veteran services, or maybe have a parade that's veterans themselves and not necessarily the guns and other things like that. So I think that both sides of the aisle have issues with this right now. And it's interesting because he said this thing about France like months ago. And it seems like the military kind of slow walked it. They were like, okay, we're just going to put that. And in the book, Wolf talks about how they kind of changed the subject to keep, because they think he won't remember or come back to things. So they're like, oh, look over there. So it seems like they kind of distracted him for a while. Then at some point, he was like, hey, what about that thing I asked for several months ago? And they were like, oh, okay, we're on it. So they don't seem too thrilled. They seem to be dragging their feet a little bit. They're like, oh, first it was 4th of July, now it's November. And so I think maybe there's time to intervene, to either distract him with something else, or maybe just keep pushing it out and hope he forgets about it.
Yeah, doesn't November already have kind of a perfect date called Veterans Day?
Exactly.
Have a parade
so
of
that was the
veterans,
idea.
perhaps.
Like, we'll use the actual veterans.
You're so literal, John. It's just.
Oh. It's like Clint Eastwood using real heroes in his movie. Carson, any thoughts on this parade idea?
The only thing I will add is I can only imagine if we were to ever get a inside look on kind of what General Mattis, Secretary of Defense, was thinking or saying when he saw what President Trump was wanting. It basically all be censored out because I can't imagine he was too pleased with the concept.
I think it started with.
Yeah. But the interesting thing here, and I think this kind of goes to a few other things that have happened recently too, coming out of the White House, is this concept that for the first time, and basically since Trump was elected, the White House was getting actually decent PR around the tax bill, around companies coming out and saying we're increasing wages, we're doing all these things for our workers, for the companies. It was kind of this trickling of just kind of good news that the White House could easily spin around and say, hey, look, we got this victory in Congress, and it's actually changing people's lives. And then they kind of just muddle up that good PR with this kind of ridiculousness, but then also other stuff that recently has come out.
Other ridiculousness.
But there's the Russian, investigation as well.
Right.
There's some folks who are saying this is all just one of these things to sort of create an argument so that CNN has something to talk about that is not Mueller, and the potential for an interview between Trump and Mueller. That this is just another sort of
Parade.
Well, yeah, parade.
Well, the people I feel sorry for are the ones who have spent the last 4 years researching their book on the Obama administration. That was going to be this enormous book, because for the next 50 years, all anyone is going to write about is how in the world did this happen? Trump is going to be this cornerstone historic moment for generations. This was a huge change, and those people that are writing those books and so forth, and this is just another example. I just thought, today I was thinking, does anybody remember the $130,000 to the porn star? That was only like 2 weeks ago.
All right.
If that had happened to Barack Obama, it would be the end of the world.
Yeah.
But now we're on to the parade now. And release the memo, by the way.
Oh, someone else said if it had happened to Bill Clinton, people would be like, well, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, Trump does kind of have a way of stepping on his own message and his own good news that he could, hey, this is happening. We got the tax bill. We got had a State of the Union address that at least went over well with a lot of Republicans. The stock market's doing well. Oh. Yeah. Speaking of the State of the Union, I assume you all watched it or something. What did you think of, again, thinking of the ways Trump will kind of sometimes, I assume, muddle his message, but this might more be the intention. After the speech and days after, where he called some folks treasonous for not applauding, and then the White House showed it doesn't know what the word jokes mean by saying that he was just joking. What did you think of that, Melissa?
Look, I'll say this: it was a lot better than his inauguration speech,
Right.
which was like, we're all gonna die. So this one, the bar may be low depending on what you think, but it seemed pretty optimistic, actually. Again, relative to what he was doing. He stayed on script, it seemed like, for the most part, which was I think something people were sort of waiting on, and it was in many ways a very traditional Republican State of the Union speech. There were certainly diversions. The sort of 15-minute immigration part was a lot, and then NFL part was interesting. But for a lot of it, it seemed like something that Jeb might have said at a State of the Union speech. So it was actually pretty traditional. But it's one of these things. So remember, after he was inaugurated, he gave this speech to a joint session of Congress in like February of 2017, and it was a decent speech. He seemed presidential, and everyone on TV was like, "Today he became the president." And then like 3 days later, he accused Barack Obama of bugging the Oval Office. So like Americans have gotten to the point, I think, where we go, okay, that was good T-minus how many hours until he just undoes all of that by accusing people of treason. Okay.
Well, and
So it's, now even when he does something that's good, and I think people, some people were really happy about, there's always this moment of like, let me just wait until we've been hurt before, I guess what I'm saying. We're having trust issues, and we don't want to get hurt again. We're withholding a little. So what are we talking about? Anyway, no, the State of the Union. So I think people, even a lot of people who liked it sort of watched it and went, okay, that was good. We didn't embarrass ourselves or anything. And then just sort of stood back and waited for the next thing to happen. And I think that's something that he's going to face repeatedly throughout his presidency, as long as he keeps, doing what he's doing.
He clearly can't help himself. I mean, his own people are keeping him away from any kind of an interview because they don't think he can be trusted. Those are his supporters. I mean, those are the people that they don't want him to talk to Mueller. He's like, I'd be happy to talk to him. No, you wouldn't. That would be a bad idea. Okay. And then they said it could be a perjury trap. And again, as Colbert said, it's not a perjury trap. It's perjury. It's But he is obviously. I mean, just the thing when he met with Schumer and Pelosi and said, "My docket thinks that sounds great," and they had to like head him off, like, "No, it's not. That's not your position." So he's all over the map, and this is what we've got. We'll just have to stick with it, I guess.
Carson, should he talk to Mueller?
Oh yeah, he's gonna have to at some point.
You think?
Because if he doesn't talk to him, he can be subpoenaed and forced to talk, right?
Yeah, I mean the Mueller thing isn't going away, no matter how much his supporters, him or other people in the White House or Republicans or anyone.
He's been vindicated already, so I don't know what you're talking about.
If it was only that easy. But I mean, it's not going away. So at a certain point, it's going to have to be a conversation between Mueller's team and him. And I mean, yeah, if it's a classic thing. If you have nothing to hide, then why not, do it? Granted, there's a situation where maybe he doesn't think there's anything to hide, but in fact there is something that they should be hiding, and he's just not aware of it, kind of like in the kind of Reagan and Iran-Contra sort of deal, or he is aware of it and just doesn't know he's aware of it. And I'm starting to talk myself in circles, am I not? But I mean, again, I think it's going to be something that has to be done at some point, because, again, Mueller is a tenacious investigator who follows the breadcrumbs, and already we're seeing, just from the little bits of information that we do know that is public, the breadcrumbs are leading toward
a bakery,
the top of the Trump Tower, So, and just given what we know about how he ran the Trump organization before he started running for president, it's the idea that he wasn't running his campaign in the same sort of mentality and the same sort of way just seems kind of weird. Why would you run this organization differently from how you've only ever run this organization that you've put your entire name on? So again, I feel like everything's kind of leading in that direction, and so whether he wants to or not, whether his team wants to or not, it's gonna have to happen, and they might as well do it on their terms rather than on Mueller's terms, because that at least puts them a little bit in kind of control of the situation.
Melissa, you're the actual legal expert here and lawyer.
I say this regardless of that. This should totally be on pay-per-view. Like, what would you pay
Make a
to
fortune.
watch
Oh my gosh!
his
Yeah.
deposition? There's just take my whole bank account. Like, that would be so amazing. Although, if you read some of so there are depositions for the Trump University case that are available. Again, if you care to Google, otherwise seemingly boring things, and you can read him getting deposed, and it is hard. Actually, I think Mueller and anyone would have a hard time deposing this man. It is like boxing a ghost, right? You try to punch, and he's like, then he just dissolves, and he's not there. You're like, what just happened? And he goes. I mean, you see these lawyers who are very well-paid, fancy pants lawyers just getting turned in circles. I mean, Carson got turned in circles just talking about it. like,
and I'm not a fancy pants lawyer either.
By Donald Trump, who just sort of goes everywhere. I think think, and Mueller, by all accounts, is an incredibly talented attorney, but I think even he would have a difficult time trying to pin down someone like Donald Trump. And even if you've just read, say, the New York Times, they always publish a transcript, or the Washington Post, they sometimes will publish a transcript of an interview with him. And if you think about what it would be like to try to get him to admit to something specific, I think it's really hard. And I'm not saying that, the ultimate result is going to be one thing or the other, but I am saying it's not clear to me that in this battle that Mueller would be the hands down winner. Like I think Trump would have a good shot at least making it very, very difficult for Mueller to do that.
I just wouldn't sell him short. I mean, the idea that at this point he has accused the FBI of being in tatters and turned people against the FBI. I mean, my father is rolling into his grave right now. He trusted the FBI. They were the Marine Corps of law enforcement. This is unquestioned, the FBI. And to have turned that to a point where, whatever it is, 65 or 73% of the people think the FBI is somehow involved in this is incredible. I mean, his ability to create a narrative, hold it up, and keep hitting it is remarkable. And I don't know how it works with Mueller, but it certainly worked with the American people, or at least some of them.
Well, someone from the audience asks about this, the whole, his claims early on. Again, we mentioned it, his claim that the Trump Tower had been bugged and all this, and what we keep learning more and more is, well, there was surveillance going on of this Trump associate. I saw something today, they might have gotten Steve Bannon on one of the phone calls and something talking about Russia. Is it a possibility that Trump Tower was bugged? Should it have been?
I mean, it's clear to me, and again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the ins and outs of all the FISA and all this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But what's clear to me is what the FBI was doing is what the FBI should have been doing. Making sure that there was not international interference in some sort of way, no sort of impropriety being done by foreign agents. Now, it just happens that those foreign agents were talking to people in the Trump campaign. Was that some sort of collusion? Again, we don't know that yet. Was there some sort of actual act being done, coordinated within the Trump campaign and then ultimately the Trump White House? We don't know that. There may have been, there may not have been. But what we do know is the FBI was doing what it was supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And that should be a narrative that should be pushing back. But of course, the FBI can't do that because then the FBI is then becoming a political actor, which they should never, ever be.
Right. And I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a political consultant, but I have learned one thing from looking at San Francisco politics. When we had that 8 Washington thing, when we were going to build the condos, remember over here, the people who were in favor of those condos, they put out charts and graphs and sunshine times and how much time the shadow would be over it and how much. And the people who were against it said, no wall on the waterfront. And they said it over and over. This memo controversy, release the memo. And then the Democrats explained in a very deep and complicated way what the deal was with the memo and why there were problems. People didn't hear that. They heard release the memo. And I think that's one of the things that he does is he makes it as concise as possible, as simple as possible, overlooking all the other little problems with it. And it's very effective. The FBI's killing me. What are they doing? Come on, they're in tatters. Okay, I agree with that. It's just, you're gonna buy that?
Well, I'm not a lawyer either, so let's move on to our next topic. So on January 23rd, which was just one day after our last week-to-week program, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors surprised lots of people by voting to replace London Breed with fellow supervisor Mark Farrell, who will serve as mayor now until the June 5th election. And then whoever wins June 5th will serve until, I believe it's November. It's not this year, November, right? It's November of 2019?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, when that person will get a full term,
That's right.
Whoever wins that one. This action was actually masterminded by the board's left wing, but it nonetheless quickly drew cries of racism. So local politics can be the most fun and surprising stuff to cover. I want to start with you, Melissa. What did you make of this? And does it say anything about where the balance of power lies in the city government right now?
Well, I was in the chambers when it happened. It was after 5, maybe 6 hours of public comment. It was a late night in there, and we had heard all sorts of cockamamie ideas about who was going to get what and what was going to happen. So there were lots of theories, and so when this happened with Mark Farrell, that was one of the theories. But we were all still, I think, pretty shocked that that was the one that happened to be the right one. So for those of you who aren't San Franciscans or just don't follow this. So Mark Farrell, the person who was made mayor, is what we call moderate. So we have a political spectrum in San Francisco. It's about that big. And on the right are moderates, and on the left are progressives. And so when we say Mark Farrell's a moderate, we mean that he's, little to the right. And he was, so he's this moderate, and he's, he represents the, Pacific Heights, Fancy Pants area of the city. And so all these progressives who basically didn't want their candidate to run against London Breed, also a moderate, basically said, we're going to put this other moderate in office just so we can avoid the incumbency problem, so that our progressive person doesn't have to run against an incumbent. So our progressive person can run against a temporary person. And everyone, they leveling the playing field, they called it, leveling the playing field. So that was the big argument in favor of this. So that's why some progressives got on board with appointing a moderate. The question is still there, why did the moderate, Mark Farrell, and also Jeff Sheehy, also a supervisor who represents the Castro, why did they go along with this plan? They have, as of yet really sort of disclosed that. There's all these theories about backroom deals being cut, about this or that. But at the end of the day, it was this sort of group of progressives plus 2 moderates who worked to put Mark into office so that everyone else has a level playing field. Now, London Breed supporters who were there and spoke for hours and hours made it very clear that they thought she was doing a great job, and that frankly this is not a level playing field if Mark Leno, who's a sort of progressive candidate for mayor, has already been running for a year and has $400,000 in the bank, and then you're going to say taking London Breed out of the incumbency spot is leveling the playing field when really he's got a huge jump on other people. So that was the debate that was happening in there. And there were serious issues and serious cries of racism, because when this happened, literally the people in the audience were so worked up that they shut down the meeting. And if you were watching on TV, it went black. Because they just were like, oh, we're going to suspend everything. And so SFGov TV just sort of shut off for a while they sort of cleared people out of the gallery, because people were so upset saying, this is war, we're not going to burn down our neighborhoods, we're going to burn down your neighborhoods. Like it was very, very emotional in the chamber, and it still is. I mean, there's still a group of women who are running ads basically saying this white guy and this white guy colluded with this white guy to put this out, to help this other white guy. And so you could see those are online. If you're clicking around, you might see one of those. A group called It's Our Time is running those, and those are a group of women who are running those ads. So, I mean, there's lots of interesting elements to it, but that's basically what happened and sort of where we are. And it's kind of surprising, because Aaron Peskin is usually pretty happy to talk about his victories. And so if he really was the mastermind behind all of this, usually he's not shy about taking credit for it. But here he's been totally tight-lipped, has said, I don't want to comment, I won't, give you any information about that. So far people are understand that it's time to not discuss the inner workings of that.
And, little known fact, the London Breed supporters want to have a military parade down Market Street.
So Chuck, Aaron Peskin, very powerful now.
Oh, yeah.
Ron Conway, not so much.
Well, Ron Conway, has become this piñata for the progressive. It's unbelievable. I mean, I don't know that it is that unusual for wealthy, influential people to get involved in politics in a major American city. I think that happens. I would just make 2 points on this. One of them is I'm obviously missing the point, because I never thought they were going to let London Breed be the acting mayor for 2 years. I mean, she's already proved that it's a huge advantage. You're on TV all the time. You're constantly presenting your message. And frankly, it's the best thing that ever happened to London Breed. I had someone come up to me and say, I thought London Breed was a guy. I didn't even know who she was. So now you do, But politically, that doesn't seem like a great idea. Now, for a progressive supervisor from the Mission, Hillary Rodham, to get up and say, I am sick and tired of wealthy, white, tech businessmen running this city. And that's why I'm nominating a wealthy, white, tech businessman for mayor. I mean, it's pretty clear. Anybody but London Breed. Anybody but London Breed. And second, I don't know that it was a good idea for her to be acting mayor. She was president of the Board of Supervisors and mayor. I mean,
they could have just made her mayor. I mean, it wasn't. They didn't have to just dethrone her as mayor and send her back to the Board of Supervisors. She could have, if they'd made her interim mayor, she would have had to relinquish her seat. So it was, I tend to agree. Like, one person should not have 17 jobs like that. But there's sort of two ways you could have gone about it, and they clearly had one way.
And it's a bit of a roll of the dice for her. If she gives up her supervisor and president of the Board of Supervisors, runs for mayor and doesn't win, she's out of a job. And this is someone who is a civic servant, God bless London Breed, but she lives in a house that she has roommates. I mean, she's not a wealthy businessman. So it would have been a bit of a roll of the dice. So I'm not sure that it was the worst thing that ever happened to her. She got a great bump in the polls. She got a lot of visibility, but like I said, I never thought they were going to try to let her handle this. Go ahead.
Well, the thing is, the Ron Conway boogeyman thing, though, is it's not clear to me that's ever worked. I mean, they always troll it out, and then, but the candidates still win every time. I mean, I hate to be too cynical about this, but it seems to be this thing they always allege, and maybe this is the one time it will work. But it seems to be the thing that that downtown business interests, and then but it doesn't stick, or at least voters don't seem to care if Ron Conway likes somebody or doesn't. They tend to maybe make their own decisions. I don't know. But before Ron Conway, it was it was the Fishers, Don Fisher, right? It was the developers, it was the real estate interests, and so it seems like it just depends on whatever is on the ascendance as an industry in the city becomes the boogeyman. And before there was Ron, there were other people, and it sort of keeps going back. And presumably eventually it'll be someone else. So it just seems like I don't know that Ron Conway's influence is down. It just seems like this is just the latest sort of role. And I'll say this, I think to some degree London Breed really came out with the best case scenario here, because as an incumbent mayor, if there's homelessness problems, your fault. If there's crime, your fault. Now she's not the interim mayor anymore. She can throw stones at Mark Farrell just like everyone else. So she's both not accountable as an incumbent mayor, and this person who is backed by some very powerful interests is a victim. Right, so she gets both things. She gets to be, not in the position of having to be accountable for all the things wrong with the city, and the visibility of being the person who got screwed at the Board of Supervisors. And I got to say, I don't know if being, in the position of mayor would have been, a tremendously, bigger advantage than she has right now.
Someone in the audience asks, is Mark Farrell going to run in November 2019? Did he take the job now to avoid running against London Breed in 2019? What he's saying is he's out of politics after this.
My understanding is he could run for mayor, but the divorce would be so expensive. He has given a lot to the city. He's got a large family. He's a very proud dad. I know he wants to spend time with his family, and I think that's what's motivating this.
Okay.
I'll
he
add,
really wants to spend more time with his
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Carson, you're just so glad
I'll
not
just
to
add,
be living
I'll
in
add
San
this to the
Francisco now.
outsider perspective. That I think from what I was watching that evening down in Los Angeles was really blowing my mind. Again, because I chuckle about the progressive moderate kind of spectrum here in San Francisco, because it's basically socialist or progressive, not really progressive moderate. But you choose your nomenclature as you will up here, guys. But what you saw was, again, and I mean this has been pointed out already, but replacing a black community activist who really for most of her entire life was on the cusp of homelessness and in many ways struggling to make ends meet, being replaced by a white venture capitalist. And the progressives all saying yes to
We won
this.
one.
Jane Kim, who's also running for mayor, really kind of applauding this sort of effort, which I think ultimately, to Melissa's point, really kind of helps London Breed in her efforts to go into the special election in June, and then maybe ultimately after that to kind of continue in a mayoral position if she's successful. But what I think a lot of this does take away from is the fact that there's a lot of issues in San Francisco that need to be addressed, that need to be debated, and that need to be discussed. And what I was really most impressed by was shortly after this all went down, London Breed kind of came out and really didn't go emotional, go on the attack to her colleagues on the board, but really started talking about the issues, talking about housing for all, talking about really kind of the things they're tackling in the city, which I think was smart from a political consultant perspective, but also necessary because regardless of what happened that night, Mark Leno, Jane Kim, London Breed, the others who are running need to talk about the issues of what's facing San Francisco, because otherwise San Francisco is going to be in a really tough position when it comes to kind of what the issues are.
Right, and just real quick, that is her Achilles heel, is that she can get emotional, and she can say things that she probably shouldn't say, and
That's why I like
puts.
her, though.
I know. What I said, I talked to some people in the campaign a little bit, and I said I love the feisty, I hate the hubris. I mean, if she's going to be feisty and picks the right things, people would love that. But the idea of when she got the job and they put out the press release saying after Mayor Lee died, they put out the press release and said President of the Board of Supervisors, London Breed, will serve as acting mayor. And she said, or her group said, get rid of the acting. And that's the kind of thing. Don't do that. You're in a good position. Say the right things on the issues, but don't make it personal. And that's the one thing she has to avoid.
Well, sticking on the election front, someone in the audience asks, what happens to California after Jerry Brown, of course. Let's talk a bit about the California gubernatorial race. There's a new poll out that shows Antonio Villaraigosa, former LA mayor, and Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom roughly tied. Despite, as I believe, Gavin Newsom still has a huge fundraising advantage. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Gavin Newsom has $16 million on hand in just his gubernatorial account. That's not accounting for what's left over in his lieutenant governor's account. And then I'm not sure if he has any other accounts open, but in, say, California, you can open accounts for everything and then fundraise and then kind of pull the money together as long as you're making sure you're following the rules still appropriately. That's more combined than Antonio Villaraigosa, John Chung, and Diane Easton all combined, so that those three individuals are the main other Democrats running in the race. The Republicans basically have no money at all, so they're a rounding error in all of this when we start talking about money.
Put in what, $5 million of his own?
Yeah, but I don't really count that as
Real money? I don't think.
Yeah, but what I'm to this PPIC poll that came out last night, Gavin Newsom's people were kind of really up in arms about it. You could kind of tell that they were a little bit freaked out by it because even before the poll was out, of course, polling agencies send out their polls to kind of everyone and embargoes it. So a bunch of people saw this poll before it ever was publicly released. And so Newsom's people knew kind of what was in the mix already before it was ever released. And they rushed out a internal poll themselves showing Gavin Newsom, I believe, at around 30%, Antonio Villaraigosa around 11%, I believe. Don't quote me on those numbers, but somewhere in that vein. John Chung also did something of similar vein too.
Is he ahead somewhere?
It showed him higher, but I definitely think it freaked them out in many ways. If you look at the numbers, what strikes me, especially when you compare it to the last PPIC poll that came out that had gubernatorial head-to-head in it, is how stagnant the race is. I mean, Gavin Newsom has been stuck in the mid to high 20s basically since the beginning. Antonio Villaraigosa in the high teens to low 20s. John Chung in kind of the low teens to high single digits. Not real much movement across the board. And again, they haven't been really spending too much yet. People haven't been paying attention to the race yet, but there seemed to be a lot of consternation amongst certain candidates coming out of last night's poll, when really it's much more of the same, and it will be more of the same.
To paraphrase Bonnie Tyler, I think we're holding out for a hero. Okay, I think we are waiting for another candidate. Let's face it, people just are not fired up about these candidates, period. The biggest winner so far in every single poll is undecided. And that's even when you have huge name recognition for people like Gavin Newsom, who's been a statewide official for 8 years now, 7 years now. And so the fact that his internal poll was only 30% does not seem to be like a great harbinger for him. And I interviewed Villaraigosa the other day, right when the numbers had come out. So basically in 2017, and so we're not counting sort of what people raised prior to that, but just in 2017, Newsom raised 10 million, and Chung raised about 7 million, and Villaraigosa raised about 4 million, and Delane Easton raised less than 500,000. And so I interviewed Villaraigosa and said, what do you make of these numbers? This doesn't look that great for you. And he said, you know what? When we started, this is true, when we started 2017, he was something like 25 points ahead of me. Now he's 3. So money can get you in the door, but it doesn't necessarily buy you poll numbers. And it seems like the Newsom campaign, again, somebody who's very well known, or at least has good name recognition, has a ceiling they just can't get beyond. 30% is the highest number we've seen for him, and if that's where you are at this point in the race, I think people are hoping that some kind of unicorn. So it would have to be self-funded because it's hard to raise money right now. But they would have to some wealthy savior gets into the race and fires things up, because right now people just are not excited about it. And Villaraigosa, despite being third, right, he's not even second, he's third, is the one creeping up in the polls.
I'm rooting for Jimmy Garofalo because I think he could step into the race and really. So 3 things. One is the knock on Newsom was always he couldn't raise money, and he is raising money, and that's a good thing. I think people see him as too slick. He's a great-looking guy. He can talk all day long without notes. That's a good thing, and it's a bad thing. But I also think that this race is not going to start until we get to 2 people. And it's probably going to be Villaraigosa, and it's going to be Newsom. And then people are going to have to make a choice. And I still think Newsom is the leader in the clubhouse. I think he's got the chops. I think he can do it. Villaraigosa, I think he can be there, but my money is still on Gavin Newsom. And he's tireless. I mean, he's ready to do this. And I do think that people who know him feel like he has become a much more mature, a much less superficial candidate and person. And I think having kids is a big reason.
I'll add this. I think for Californians, they should hope that it's Newsom versus either Villaraigosa or Chung. Because then you're going to actually have a debate on the issues, on kind of the future of California, on actually getting concrete plans out of the candidates. If it is Newsom versus a Republican, you're not going to get any of that. Newsom can go into he can really kind of fall asleep and not do anything. And you'll still win by 30 to 40 points probably. So I think Californians, conservative Californians as well as progressive liberal Californians should hope that it's Newsom versus one of the other 3 major Democrats. Really, it's looking like in the polling that's really going to be a battle between Villaraigosa and John Chung.
Okay.
I just want to real quick. It was interesting that they brought up the affair at this point. Newsom had an affair with the wife of Alex Turk, who was his campaign manager, one of his best friends, and it was an awful moment in City Hall, and an awful moment for him. And it reinforced this whole idea of this guy who's a dilettante, doesn't have great morals. But by bringing it up at this point, and by having him answer it, and he apologized profusely. And then by having her, actually she posted on her Facebook page, said, I don't think this is a Me Too moment. I was 33. I knew what I was doing. It'll be interesting to see how that plays, but it's interesting that they brought that up this early.
Well,
Well,
I mean, of course
Villaraigosa.
I brought it up because Travis Allen, who's a GOP candidate, is being accused of sexual harassment. I mean, in the big data dump from Sacramento we got the other day, allegations against Allen are in there. And so for some Republicans, we're hoping he would drop out because that would help Republicans coalesce around a candidate. So maybe there would be a shot of getting into, into the runoff. And so Travis Allen gets accused. There's these documents that are unearthed about accusations against him, and he goes, "Oh, wait a minute.
Speaking of that,
Let's talk about that guy and that guy." So it's not a surprise. We knew it would come up at some point, but yeah, Travis Allen brought it up as sort of a him too moment.
Yeah. Of course, Villaraigosa had his infamous affair also when he was LA mayor. So
with some sort of TV report.
with a reporter, yeah. And so they all have their dirty laundry, and they're airing it right now, apparently.
Okay.
John Chung, though, I am sure, upstanding man. Delaney Easton also.
We're getting close to the end, so before we end, I do want to quickly get into another topic. I want to poll you here in the audience. Applaud, because I can't see a darn thing with these lights coming in. Applaud if you or someone you know has had their car broken into. Anybody? So here in San Francisco, the number of car break-ins rose by 26% last year, and there have only been a handful of arrests, I guess 13 arrests over 7 years for this crime. There's even a Twitter account called @SFCarBreakins. So if you want to commiserate with others, you know where to go with it. Carson, is this a San Francisco thing, or is this an out-of-control problem in Southern California, too?
I'm not aware of it in Southern California. Being a problem of this magnitude, I guess. I think it speaks more broadly to kind of the socioeconomic pressures that we're starting to see up and down all of California. But what kind of started off as an inland California situation has now been creeping into the coastal California communities, where you have people who are down. I mean, they're just so socioeconomically down, and cars are easy target. Versus everything else. Now, I have never had, when I lived in the Bay Area, never had my car broken into. I've had it peed on quite a few times in San Francisco, which was
it just wasn't near a bathroom.
Unpleasant as well. But no, I think this isn't just a car break-in situation. This speaks to a larger kind of problem that we're starting to see more and more so in our cities in California, regardless of whether you're in San Francisco, in Southern California, or inland California.
Well, I have had my car broken into, and in 12:30 in the afternoon, in broad daylight, broke out the back window, flipped down the back seat of the car, looked in, saw my golf clubs. They probably see me play golf. They figured no point in stealing those clubs. They obviously don't work, but it was $225. And now you've got me on my high horse here, John, because the Chronicle columnist Heather Knight went out with a couple of residents up to Twin Peaks and Lombard Street, and watched people break into cars. And what they told her was, I can tell you who it's going to be right now. It's going to be somebody in an SUV, probably gray or silver or white. They'll have paper plates on. They'll drive by about 3 or 4 times. They'll check out the scene. They'll jump out, break a window, get something, jump back in the car and go. She figured that out in one afternoon. The police can't figure that out?
It's not the police, though. And frankly, this SUV, it doesn't sound like poor people necessarily. Like, this sounds like just people who are opportunists. And here's the thing. The problem isn't just the police. The reason the police won't arrest people is because there's a problem with the prosecution. You can arrest people all day, but unless the DA can prosecute the cases properly, then it doesn't matter. And so the police have figured this out, and they're like, why would I waste my time if it's not? And I'm not blaming George Gascon. The problem is we have some very funky legal situations right now. So, for example, if one person breaks the window and the other person steals stuff, those are 2 different tiny, tiny little crimes. Like, a court is not going to put those 2 together and say, oh, you broke in a car to steal stuff. They're going to go, well, you get a ticket for breaking a window, and you get a ticket for stealing something really small. And so people have figured out you use 2 people, and then you get, worst case scenario, you get nothing. You get a $30 ticket. And the other problem is that you can, if the door, get this, if the door is locked is the key. And so if you go to court and you go, well, my car was broken into, I'm testifying about my car, and the public defender will say, well, was your car locked? And you go, I don't know, I think so. Well, you think so? Because if your car is not locked at the time that the window is broken, it is not actually breaking and entering. And so whether the car is locked becomes a big, crazy issue. I will say this, though. Now Senator Scott Wiener and some other folks have introduced legislation to close these kinds of loopholes to make it easier for the DA to prosecute. Again, I'm not blaming the DA. I'm just saying there's like some weird legal issues. To make it easier for DAs to prosecute, to make it, to get rid of those little, sort of sideways things. And I think if that happens and that passes, and it should, it's got a lot of support, then you'll see more police making arrests because they believe that they will actually lead to some kind of punishment and some kind of prosecution. But I think that's where the juggernaut has ended up in San Francisco. So fingers crossed for Senator Scott Wiener's bill to kind of fix the situation.
This is nothing to do about car break-ins, but I'm just going to say this. Senator Wiener and I don't really have all too much in agreement when it comes to ideology, but he's been producing some of probably the best bills in Sacramento, amongst too many bills in Sacramento, but his really do stand out. So continue to pay attention to what he's doing, because he's really, I think, trying to fix a lot of problems that are really systemically across San Francisco, but also across the state.
Listen, we're going to have a lot more news quiz questions and so much more to talk about on Monday, March 12th, for our next week-to-week program. You can find our week-to-week news program, our news quiz every week on the website. Thanks to our great panel, Melissa Kane, Carson Bruno, Chuck Nevius, and thanks to all of you who've come out here today, listening and watching online. Have a great rest of your week.